Hello and welcome to 3.2 Lab 2. Go ahead and fill out the student information after you've opened this up in your browser and Visual Studio, and let's dive into the lab. In this case, we're going to need a variable section. We're going to need assignments, calculations, and output just like before. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be doing some additional calculation using a little more complex value of information with pricing and things like that that you would find more in a business type of environment. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create variables that will hold our information. And by the way, our output is going to end up looking similar to what I have here. So the first thing we need is we need these 9 variables: total price, widget, and all that. Now, here's a little note I have here. You may add more variables if you would like to. In fact, when I go through my lab, you're going to see actually I didn't use current value, but I did add some other variables to this. Now, the reason why I'm doing that, I'm showing you that, is to show you that there is more than one way to do some of these things. Some things are maybe more efficient, maybe setting yourself up for long-term enhancements and things like that. So you need to think some of those things out, but I'm giving you the freedom to add more variables if you want to. So here's what I did, and you may do yours a little differently. I have total price, widget price, quantity total, doodad price, quantity total, gadget price, quantity total, current value, and average price. So here I have those variables set up. I also, though, want to show you that I added, if you notice, this just says price quantity, and I added total to widgets, doodads, and gadgets, and that'll become clearer as we go through as to why I did that. So I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I added 3 more variables, so I have 12. Then our next step is we need to prompt the user for 3 prices, for widgets, doodads, and gadgets, and then assign them to their variables, appropriate variables. Quantity, ask for a quantity from the end user, assign those, make sure we've converted them all to numbers. So here's what we did, is I have widget price, I'm prompting, converting it to a number. Same thing with doodads, gadgets, and I did the same thing with the quantities. So I'm prompting them for that information and housing it, converting it to a number. So then if we go on to our calculations, we need the item total to be calculated by multiplying the quantity of items for that price item. So here in the example output, 5 times $5.99 is $29.95. We need to do that calculation, and then we're going to calculate the average price. This is what happens at a lot of retail stores and their programs and stuff when they're doing calculations of this type of information. So I'm going to calculate the total, and I'm going to calculate the average. Now, this is why I chose to create some more variables, some total variables. Let me show you. What I did is in my widget, doodad, and gadget totals, that's where I did my calculation of price times quantity. The reason I did that is it just made some of my code a little easier to work with, as far as down here when I go to do my document rights, I could just put in that total variable for widgets, doodads, and gadgets. I could have maybe taken widget price times widget quantity and put it in parentheses down here and had it do the calculation on the fly if I wanted to, but that's not really a best practice. I wanted it to do the calculation in the calculation section, store it in a variable, and then make my document rights as simple as possible. So that's how I did that, and then it also made it easier to do my total price calculation, where I could just add up the totals for whatever that bill is for the total price. And then that made it easy to do the average price for the totals of taking the total price, dividing it by 3. So with that being said, then if I come back here, then I need to display the entered items and the quantities and item total and the total price of all items on the screen. So I just did some document rights with my quantity, my prices, my totals, my total price, and my average price. So that when we do this, it's going to ask, okay, enter a widget price, $5.99. Enter a doodad price, $12.99. Enter a gadget price, $1.75. Enter a widget quantity, 5. Enter a doodad quantity, 10. Enter a gadget quantity, 2. And so it is actually doing the calculation for me 5 at $5.99 for $29.95, for $129.9, $3.50. Now, you may wonder, what in the world is this goofy stuff right here? There is a known quirk with programming where you have some kind of leftover bits, for lack of a better term. There's ways to fix that where you can say, I only want this calculation to go out 2 decimal places, and you can even, that can also even force a 0 behind my 9 and 5 here, for example. It's called to-fixed. So if I were to wrap that in a to-fixed, let me just show you one example here. If I take my my total here and I say dot to fixed 2, because I want 2 decimal places, and $5.99, let me do that, $5.99, okay, $12.99, $1.75, 5 to 10. See, I don't have those. It's just $29.95. I don't have the extra numbers at the end. So sometimes you do stuff like that for a presentation level, so it looks nice. So you can use built-in functions. All languages have them. I'm not requiring it at this level, but all languages have them. You're probably going to want to do it in a production environment. Anyway, so what we did was, this was a more convoluted one where we had several pieces of information we were keeping track of. We had to figure out how to do some calculations and store it in certain variables, and even maybe add some variables if you needed them to. You don't have to, but you can. It might make it easier. And then outputted that information to the screen from the end user after the calculations. So hopefully that worked out for you. If you have any questions, let me know, and happy coding.